If you've ever asked the universe for some kind of sign and got it clear as day, what was it and how did it go? All my life, whenever I went to the beach I had wanted to find an intact sand dollar. I had found lots of pieces, but never a whole one. When I was in my mid-30s, I went with a group of friends to the coast. I was walking alone along the beach and the moonlight close to midnight. I was feeling very sorry for myself in the dark and really lonely, even though I was with my friends that weekend. I had just started thinking the thought, wouldn't it be a great sign right now to know that I'm loved if I finally found a sand dollar? I had barely formed the thought when I looked down, and right at my feet was an intact sand dollar. My then girlfriend was having a really awful week. I felt terrible for her, which made me realize how serious our relationship was because empathy is not a strong suit of mine. She wanted to take a trip to the Grand Tetons to clear her head. She wanted to see a moose on this trip, but it was August, so relatively unlikely, since they tend to move to higher elevations that time of year. I had never seen a moose in the wild. Before we left, I thought if we see a moose on this whirlwind 72-hour road trip I will take it as a sign I should marry this girl. Sure enough, right in the middle of the day, on one of the busiest trails in the park, is a great big bull moose hanging out in the lake. Married 5 years this year. I decided to kill myself about the age of 13. Life sucked, and I planned to go home from church that night and off myself if there was no direct intervention. Out of nowhere my aunt stopped me and said, "I feel like you need to come home with me, and I'm still here." Damn bitch. I was in the depths of despair. I had lost my great job, had to travel 2 hours every day with heavy tools each way to a temporary job I was doing. Sitting on the bus, thinking my world was over, and it all kind of got to me all at once, and I began to tear up, not wanting to bawl my eyes out in public. I held it in. So I asked for something, anything that could show me that life wasn't worthless. A lady I didn't see must have how bad I was, or maybe it was just coincidence, but just after I cried out in my head, I heard the words, "Everything is going to be okay." It saved my life. Lottery tickets. I was always curious about lottery tickets, but never wanted to indulge in it. One day in a grocery store, I told the universe, "I'm going to buy a lotto ticket now, not the grand bumper ones, just a simple scratch one. For the first time in life, if I win a prize, I'll take it as a sign from you and never buy it again." I bought a ticket for $3, scratched it and won $500. I smiled and donated $250 of the amount. Enjoyed some good food multiple times with the other $250. Never bought or looked at a lottery ticket again. Will never do. I had asked the universe for a sign of good and friendly people really existing out in this world. I know, it's kinda stupid, but I have struggled with making friends that weren't toxic, and I felt like I just wasn't destined to have great friends. About 2 days after I had asked for a sign, I went to my local park to do my daily routine of sitting down, smoking my cigarettes, and reading, and for some strange reason, a pair of strangers came up to me and introduced themselves. We ended up talking with each other for what felt like hours, and eventually I had asked them why they came up to me, and the guy said, "Oh, we made a deal to see if we could make any new friends, and we did. You're a new friend." After, we all walked and got some cookies and ice cream and chilled again by the river this time. They both are now my closest friends, and it all started because I was at the right place and at the right time for them to come up to me. I strongly believe that it was the universe's doing, and I'm so grateful for it. This wasn't really asking for a sign, but I was going through a lot, and in a really shitty and dark place, like the kind of place I honestly wasn't sure I'd survive. I was teetering on the edge of despair and genuinely going down the path towards doing something insanely drastic. I basically just asked the universe for help one day while in the middle of another crying episode, and I had this strange, sunny feeling kind of leak into the darkness I was harboring inside of me. The next day, by chance, I met my group of friends on a video game I played regularly at the time. They lived in an entirely different city and had entirely different lives from me, but we all just clicked. It took a month or two for me to settle into that friendship and understand that they were gonna stick around, and they've been my best friends for 3 years now. Some of my best memories are from that first summer that I knew them. I genuinely don't think I would have survived that time in my life had I not met them. I was feeling incredibly alone, and I was trying to come to terms with a lot of things all at once. I'm infinitely grateful for them, and I can't help but think that the universe was listening that day when, as a last-ditch effort, I asked it for help. I was in a bad time of my life. I grew up quite naive and I'd like to say sheltered. So when my first boyfriend broke up with me, it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. He was my first, and I took it very seriously, so it made it 1000x worse for me. I already had depression, but this knocked me onto suicidal territory. I wasn't sleeping, lost 20 pounds BC, I wouldn't eat. I felt sickly, weak, and just didn't want to be here anymore. I felt like no one cared. I just wanted someone to hold me and tell me that it'll be okay. I like to drive and blast my music when I'm upset to unwind. So I started to drive on the highway and I decided I was finally going to end it. A few minutes before I was going to gear my car off the highway into the lining of trees, I looked in my rearview mirror and saw an ambulance driving behind me. I had never seen an ambulance on the highway that didn't have its signal going, and immediately broke down and cried. The ambulance was just cruising behind me. I took that as a sign that the universe did care and that I was significant. So I drove home to my mother and told her I needed help. I was taken to the hospital, put on medication, and went to therapy for my underlying issues and depression. A year and a half later I'm off medication, no longer needing therapy, and currently thriving. That ambulance truly saved me that day. I'm not superstitious at all, but my uncle is. When my nan passed, he went to see a fortune teller who told him that anytime our family sees white feathers around, that's Nan's way of showing us that she's there. I thought it was a load of bullshit and forgot about it. A few years later I was at a music festival. Everything was coated in dirt and dust being churned up by thousands of people's feet. Even the air was so thick with dust it was making it hard to see and breathe. I was on the edges of the mosh pit when I started to have my first panic attack. I'd never had one before, didn't know what was happening to me, and I was terrified. I felt like I was being crushed, and like I was the only person in the world at the same time. I remember desperately thinking back, quote, I don't want to be alone. I don't want to be here alone. I crouched down in the middle of the dirty dusty crown, and when I opened my eyes there was a single white feather on the ground right between my feet. It was perfectly white, no dirt, not stepped on or anything in a mosh pit. I stared at the feather until I could get my breathing under control and get out of there, and I still have that feather. My wife and I had been considering getting a second cat for some time without reaching any conclusion. Then, as I was walking back to the apartment one evening, a young feline popped up out of the drainage beside the sidewalk. Basically, he just looked at me and said, "Let's cut to the chase. I'll be moving in with you now. You need a cat." I'm a very cute, completely adorable kitten. The only problem I see here is that you might not be smart enough to recognize this opportunity. Be your best self right now, dude. So I looked at him and said, I can't make this decision solo. Let me go get the wife. He just looked at me and nodded his head like, go on, I'll wait. Considering that she just decided that today was cat bath day, he may be regretting the decision, but I'm completely okay with the way things have gone over the past years. Sounds really stupid, but I was visiting my nanny, and she had just spontaneously told me her sexual abuse story. I was shocked, and hadn't ever told anyone mine. So on the drive home I jokingly told myself, if there's Y in the next number plate I see on the way home I'll tell my boyfriend my story. Probably 9/10 cars had a Y on them. I think it was just a coincidence, but at least I got to tell my story and I don't regret it. I had gotten a job at a retail store and went in for the orientation and to do training. The vibe was kind of off in the store, but I ignored it. I got to the back where the computers were, but couldn't shake the feeling of being uncomfortable. In my head I said, alright universe. If I'm not meant to work here, show me some kind of sign. Make them send me home for the day or something. About an hour later, a huge storm rolled in and shut off the power in the store. The manager came in and said for me to go home since their computers weren't working and I couldn't do my training. A couple months later, and I was working at a new job that I absolutely love. I was 18 years old, recently graduated from high school and basically being forced to attend cosmetology school by my stepmom, while also working a full-time job. I was exhausted all the time. My stepmom and I were very religious for a long time, but I was starting to question my faith and stop making church a priority. This caused a lot of drama, and I think resentment, from her and my father who worked out of the country. While attending cosmetology school I had made friends, and was so starved for any sort of friendship and I guess even affection I would tell them the things I hated about my home life. They helped me start to see how toxic my parents and situation was. I knew I had to move out. I tried to do so amicably, but to no avail. In fact, my attempts to leave peacefully backfired and caused more problems. At the time, being religious, I prayed for a way out. But my prayers rarely were answered, so I grew hopeless. A few weeks later, after a rough few days between me and my stepmom, things came to a head one night and she called my father. They had threatened for years to kick me out. I was a seriously well-behaved kid, so I was always the one to apologize for whatever they thought I did that was so horrible. This particular night, when the threat entered the air, I saw it as a sign and a fleeting opportunity. I packed my things and was gone the next day. It's been 4 years and I'm now living in a different state with my husband and daughter, and our second child is due to be born in about a month. My son passed away, and I sat at the kitchen table in shock. I couldn't really believe he was gone. I asked him to send me a sign, so I'd know he was still with us, in spirit if not in body. A few minutes later all the lights in the house went out. I didn't believe it was him, so I even checked the fuse box. I almost called an electrician, but for some reason I couldn't bring myself to do it. It was just the lights. The power points still worked, so I could cook, and the fridge was on. It stayed that way for 2 days, until I eventually said, okay, I know it's you, and they came back on. I was so overwhelmed with grief at the time. This seemed like nothing, but now I see how crazy it was. I get this might be hard for some people to believe, but I really don't care if anyone believes it or not. I just needed to know he was somewhere else besides in the ground, because he was only in his 20s and it just wasn't fair he was gone so young. You should never outlive your children. My mother passed away when I was a baby, so I have no memories of her, and my dad rarely talks about her as it was very painful for him. I had a very abusive childhood and don't really speak to my family much, so I'm very much an independent loner. In a moment of weakness seeking support, I asked the universe and my mother for guidance, and that if she really is there watching over me to wake me up at exactly 3:33 am that night. She proved she was there for me that night. Woke up randomly at exactly 3:33 am. I found more strength that night and I continue to seek ways of connecting with her. Walking to my car to go smoke weed with some friends, and I asked the universe if this should be the last time I smoke. Turned on the car. Radio goes on. Fucking Tom Petty, Last Dance with Mary Jane. What are the chances? Right? Wasn't my last dance. I'd been unhappy in my line of work for some time. I had been reading some self-help books, I'm not religious, called Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh. It talked about the universe reflecting your thoughts, words, and actions directly back at you. i.e., wanting a career change results in a reality of wanting a career change. There was a message about being and not doing. So I wanted to test this with an experiment, as it all sounded a bit mumbo jumbo. So I volunteered in a special needs youth club, so I could be and give what I wanted the universe to reflect back at me. This led to a job as a support worker for special needs in a college, which led to completing a distance learning degree, which led to teacher training, which led to being a graduate lecturer, which led to deputy management of a whole faculty, and ultimately a career helping hundreds of people each year. I have continued to practice this creating your own reality philosophy of being through thoughts, speech and actions. The number of times it works cannot be just luck. Believing in luck is just as far-fetched if you really think about it. X. Once while walking to work as a teenager, I asked God to show me a sign if I should get out of my relationship, abusive ex, and just as I finished the prayer, a fish came flying out of nowhere and smacked me in the face. I went down and blacked out for a second, and when I came to there were these 3 hillbilly men surrounding me, fanning me, and just generally freaking out. When they realized I was awake they just started apologizing and said they swore they had put the strap on their cooler. They gave me some ice for my eye and walked me down to work so I could call my mom to pick me up. I broke up with my ex the next day out of fear of being smacked by a rogue fish again.